Hello, everyone. I'm Gerri Willis, live from our nation's capital. Big surprises from the Supreme Court today as our nation's highest court upholds Obamacare as constitutional. But the biggest surprise, a little noticed impact of the ruling that could send our nation's deficit soaring. Here's what you haven't heard tonight. The Willis Report has learned the court's decision to allow states to refuse new Medicaid dollars could send hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of low-income people to the health care exchanges. Exchanges that would rely on federal dollars to cover their tab. And federal dollars are our tax dollars. Already, the Congressional Budget Office has been pushing up its estimates of the cost of this new entitlement. Now it says it will crunch the numbers again. The president said Obamacare would cost in the billions. Now it's trillions. Where does it go next? For more, I'm joined by Republican Senator Mike Lee of Utah. Senator, welcome back to the show. Always great to have you here.
Thank you.
You were sitting in the courtroom today. You said it was very surprising to you and the people who were in that courtroom, the decision we had. Tell us about that.
Well, it was interesting. First the court explained how this went beyond Congress's power under the Commerce Clause. This was only the third time in 75 years, since 1937. That the Supreme Court has identified something Congress did under the Commerce Clause as beyond Congress's power. Then the court completely shifted and went into a different direction and said, we're going to uphold it anyway as a tax. Surprised everyone and really changed the landscape of this case.
Changed the landscape dramatically. Everybody's trying to respond tonight. Now, you're very familiar with the Supreme Court. You clerked for Judge Alito. You know all these people very well. How surprising is it to someone like you who might have had some insight about how these people might respond?
I talk a lot with fellow court watchers and law geeks. I don't know one of them who predicted this outcome, not a single one. So we're shocked, obviously, those of us who watch the court very closely. No one expected this. It really came quite out of left field, and nobody's quite sure how to read it moving forward.
Well, there are lots of questions that remain unanswered. One of the things you've been talking about today that I find so interesting, now that we're talking about the mandate as a tax, well, that has a lot of political ramifications. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, it does have a lot of political ramifications because, of course, Congress didn't pass this as a tax. In fact, it promised us that it was not a tax. Right. The president made the same promise. Now we're told that the Supreme Court has deemed it a tax, and that's the only way that it's been upheld on constitutional grounds. The American people don't really want a tax. They weren't wild about the mandate even before this ruling came out. I can hardly imagine that it's going to be more popular now that they consider it a tax increase.
So do you think the polling on this, that the opinion on Obamacare is going to go downhill because of this very fact?
I predict that it's going to go downhill, and I predict this is going to be a major issue in this November's election, resulting in significant gains for Republicans in Senate races, in some House races, and that it's going to help propel Mitt Romney to the White House.
I want to talk about something that Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid had to say. He says he's all ready to work with Congress, with the House, to try to come to some kind of agreement. Here's Harry Reid.
We know that when we come back here after the elections, there may be some things we need to do to improve the law, and we'll do that working together. But today, millions of Americans are already seeing the benefits of the law that we passed.
Seeing the benefits, you agree with that?
I don't. We're not seeing the benefits. In fact, we're not seeing until today what Congress actually passed. This gives whole new meaning to what Nancy Pelosi said before it was passed. You've got to pass it to find out what's in it. Well, we didn't really find out until more than 2 years after the fact that it's actually a tax. And people aren't real happy about this. They're going to demand better. People are going to be voting differently based on this decision today.
Well, the president himself has had some words on taxes. Here's the president talking about how he won't raise your taxes.
Your critics say it is a tax increase.
My critics say everything's a tax increase. My critics say that I'm taking over every sector of the economy. You know that. Look, we can have a legitimate debate about whether or not we're going to have an individual mandate or not. But
you reject that it's a tax increase.
I absolutely reject that notion.
Such a chameleon. I mean, at the end of the day, I think Americans will read it as a new tax. What do you think?
Well, of course they will. And, he also promised he wouldn't raise taxes on anyone ever making less than $250,000 a year.
Right.
But, of course, the Joint Committee on Taxation tells us 75% of the economic burden will be borne by people earning less than $250,000 a year. So this is a problem. It's a problem for the president. It's a problem for those who have supported this law.
Mike Lee, tell us where this goes next, because you're an important Republican. You know what the conversations are going on in the House. Tell us where you see this going.
I think shortly after the July recess, the House will reconvene. The House will probably vote again to repeal Obamacare. We'll probably see successive votes to repeal at least the individual mandate provision. Now maybe we'll call it the individual mandate tax. I don't know. At some point it'll get to the Senate. I don't know whether the majority leader, Senator Reid, will allow that for a vote or not. But those who vote against repealing either the tax or the bill as a whole will do so at their own political peril, because the American people want to be able to make their own health care decisions rather than having them made by Washington bureaucrats.
It's going to be interesting to see. Senator Mike Lee, thanks for coming on tonight. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.